Before we get started, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of the content that is released by GoCollect. And if you're interested, head over to Regie Collects here on YouTube. Regie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector and the host of the GoCollect speculation video, and I want to welcome you to another episode. In this episode, we are going to spend some time talking about some amazing blog posts that have been sent in to GoCollect. And I will tell you that I am struggling with some of these blog posts, and I'm going to be looking for your comments and thoughts down in the comment section because maybe you can help me to understand the perspective a little bit better. If you haven't watched the recent Godzilla and King Kong movie, I want to encourage you to treat yourself. It is a fantastic movie, and honestly, in preparation for this movie, I watched all of the previous Godzilla and King Kong movies to get myself ready for this movie, and it was good. It did not disappoint at all. But our blogger actually takes a little bit of time to maybe demonstrate that he is Team King Kong by highlighting some King Kong related comics that you may want to check out. The very first book that he highlights in this blog post is Mad issue number 6. Now this is actually a little bit of a parody of King Kong, so not truly his first appearance in comics. That actually comes a little bit later and technically isn't really his first appearance in the funny pages because he was actually published in comic strips as well. But Mad issue number 6 is a book that has to be recognized because he did appear in terms of his likeness. The other book that you really might want to focus on is Adventures into the Unknown issue number 79. And this is his proper first appearance in the comic book format. The third book that I want to mention to you, I think is kind of sort of a really cool book. It is a gorgeous cover featuring King Kong. And we are talking about King Kong issue number 1 from Gold Key. And this book was released in 1968. And as I mentioned, is a wonderful cover that technically is King Kong's first cover appearance. You can actually pick this book up for just a couple of bucks. Even high-grade copies of this book are selling for less than $300. And the highest grade, a 9.6, hasn't sold in several years, but even it wasn't all that expensive. So if you are Team King Kong, there is a couple of books on this list that you may want to check out. This blog post is linked down in the description. And if you happen to be Team Godzilla, let me know what books you actually have in your collection down in the comments section. This next blog post, to some degree or another, is all about speculation. Speculating on whether we are going to see the Inhumans come back into the MCU as a result of Kamala Khan actually having her own show on the Disney Plus streaming service. So for those that don't know, Kamala Khan is actually an Inhuman. She is an Inhuman that had her powers activated by the Terrigen Mist that was released. And this character is pretty popular. And so a lot of folks are speculating that because she is going to have her own show, that might actually open the door for the Inhumans to return. And there are a lot of folks that are crying about that because people kind of sort of consider the Inhumans the poor man's X-Men. No? I can't say that? Oh. Alright. So if you believe this to be true, you may want to check out Fantastic Four issue number 45 because that is the first appearance of a couple of the Inhumans. And certainly, if you can find them, there are some really awesome books featuring Kamala Khan that are out there as well. And I'm curious whether you think we are going to see Black Bolt and Crystal and some of the other Inhumans appear. Is that something that you want to see? Or are you okay based upon the performance of that last TV show? One of the things that I will tell you is that Fantastic Four 45 suffered as a result of that last show, and values actually plummeted. But over the last little bit, it seems like this book has actually recovered. During the past 12 months, the value of this comic at all grades has risen by approximately 25%. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the future, especially if the Inhumans make it to the small screen. Everyone who is paying attention readily recognized that the comic book market is on fire. And there are a couple of properties that are at a higher temperature than most. And I am specifically talking about any and everything related to the X-Men, but specifically Giantsize XMen #1 is on fire. This book recently sold for $22,500 on the eBay machine and shows no signs of slowing down at all. Our next blogger actually does a pretty solid job over the course of this blog post of highlighting exactly why this book seems to be performing really well, and actually does an analysis comparing Giantsize XMen #1 to Silver Surfer issue #1. And one of the things that I will highlight for you is just some of the data in terms of how Giantsize XMen issue #1 is performing. When you dig into the data, what you see is that a 9.6 last sold for $11,000. There are 394 of these books on the census, and there is a positive return of about 20%. When you look at a 9.8, as mentioned, this book sold recently for $22,500 with 201 on the census, and this book has a positive return of 132%. And here's the thing, we haven't even seen the X-Men on the screen in the MCU at all. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this book is in another year or two when the X-Men actually make their debut. This blog post is linked down in the description. Check it out. Let me know what you think. As I mentioned in the intro of this video, there is a blog post that I'm struggling with a little bit, and this is it. And I want to encourage you guys to read this blog post and let me know whether I'm thinking about this in the right way, because maybe I'm not. And so I'm going to be very receptive to other people's thoughts and opinions on this one. But in this blog post, the blogger highlights that an NFT, a non-fungible token item, recently sold for $69 million. And essentially, the blogger is suggesting that because this sale happened, that there is the possibility that the entire comic book market is going to shift to digital books that are sold via NFTs. And I'm struggling just a little bit with the dots that are being connected. The blogger compares the NFT to a certificate of authenticity, which is something that we all kind of understand. Oftentimes, certificates of authenticity kind of convey ownership or authenticity of a specific item. Now, when you talk about comics, comics are mass produced. So they don't come with a certificate of authenticity unless it's signed, which is where the certificate of authenticity actually supports that signature. You don't get it for the comic itself. And so when you have a comic that is mass produced, you technically only own that copy that you possess. You don't own all the comics, unlike an NFT, which is your ownership, your proof of ownership of that asset. So that's again is why I'm kind of struggling with how we go from NFTs, 69 million, to all comics being sold by NFTs. Where I can see NFTs actually playing a role is when we talk about digital art. There are artists out there that don't actually put pen to paper. They put electronic pen to electronic screen to create their artwork. So I can see an artist selling that digital artwork to be able to supplement their income. I kind of get that when you're talking about original art. But when you're talking about mass-produced comics, that's where I'm struggling just a little bit. So again, I definitely want to encourage you guys to read this blog post. It is linked down in the description. Maybe I'm not thinking about it in the right way. And so I definitely am interested to hear what your thoughts are. What's old is new again, and that is certainly true for things that are from the 80s, because right now the 80s are where it is. And our next blogger does a really good job of highlighting 3 intellectual properties from the 80s that are on fire. And the very first one that the blogger talks about is Transformers, specifically Transformers issue number 1, which is cram-packed with all kinds of first appearances. At present, this book has an FMV of $2,350 at a 9.8. And it should be pointed out that prior to October 2020, this book at a 9.8 had not reached $1,000 before. And so again, Transformers, the 80s, super hot. The next property that the blogger talks about is the Thundercats, specifically Thundercats issue number 1. Again, another book that is full of all kinds of first appearances. Rumors regarding this property being turned into a movie is part of the reason why we have seen such an uptick in value associated with this book, but also lots of copies of this book exchanging hands. As of when this article was written, there was an increase of 168% in terms of the number of copies sold week over week. And as I mentioned, there are rumors that Warner Brothers Studios is going to make a movie out of Thundercats. And if this happens, we are going to see the number of copies exchanging hands as well as the value of Thundercats number 1 increasing substantially. The very last property that is mentioned in this blog post is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The super popular, super hot right now turtles are definitely on a lot of people's radar. If you are curious about any of these 80s properties, I definitely want to encourage you to check out this blog post. It is honestly worth a read. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, I want to encourage you to tune in next week when we get to do this all over again.